Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing my cards using Love From Lizi December 2018 card kit. This is a beautiful card kit that's full of florals and butterflies and real soft colors. It is packed full of pattern paper. There are 16 sheets of 8x8 pattern paper. So with that much paper, you can definitely make quite a few cards. I always get quite a few requests to use up all of the pattern paper in the monthly kits. And in the past, I've usually done like a two-part video just because there's so many cards that you can make. Well, with the holidays so close, I decided to just finish it all in one shot this time. I also decided to make multiples of the same cards using similar sketches and similar designs. So starting with this first set of cards, I'm using Sketch Saturday number 532. So very similar to my 6x6 paper pad tutorial videos, I'm going to use the same sketch, but I'll just use different pattern paper designs. With all this pattern paper, there's about 8 sheets that are double-sided. And one thing I really like about this collection is a lot of the designs have this real soft tone-on-tone pattern. It's perfect to use those patterns as the background of the card. Then you can use these busier designs as the focal point. So on both of the cards, I used a piece of the lace that comes in the kit, and I adhered that with some score tape and then used another piece of score tape to the back of that card front just to hold it in place. Then after I adhere the card front onto a card base, I'm just going to use some of these lovely pearls for the embellishments. So I chose to use these really large ones because they fit perfectly with this sketch design. With embellishments this thick on a card, it wouldn't go through the mail very easily, but this is perfect for donating or handing someone the card. For the sentiment on the card, I used this really lovely thank you die that has a little heart on the corner. And I cut one of them in the gold satin cardstock and then the other one in silver. Because after Christmas, we all need a lot of thank you cards, so this was a perfect die to have in the kit. And I actually made 4 cards using this sketch. I just didn't record the making of all of them. For my next set of cards, I'm using Sweet Sunday sketch number 288. This time I used some of the busier pattern papers for the background of the card and some of those lighter tone-on-tone designs for this little banner that goes in the middle of the card. The kit has a lot of purple in it, but it also has some real light pink, and I just love the pink. Of course, pink is my favorite color, but this looks really pretty with this soft green. I don't always stick exactly to the sketch measurements, but for this set of cards I did. Now for that square element, I used some of this really pretty glitter pink paper. So this is one of the specialty cardstock packs. And this is a nice glitter paper because it doesn't actually make a big mess. It doesn't shed. Although when you cut it, there are a few flakes that would come off. So if you're donating cards to maybe a hospital or a retirement home, maybe with a lot of open wounds, I would suggest skipping the glitter paper. It's always better to be safe. Now when adhering paper on top of this glitter paper, I noticed that my ATG doesn't quite hold it strong enough. It kind of pops off, but with some liquid adhesive, it adheres it just fine. So now this final little finishing touch, I'm using some more of these lovely pearls. This time I chose the really tiny ones, and I'm just putting 3 of them in the lower corner on each of the cards. And these pearls are self-adhesive, but I always use a little extra glue just to make sure they stay in place. And then I don't always remember to show this part, but I usually add some of those thin scraps to the inside of all of the cards. And then once again, I did make 4 using this sketch. So now on to the next set of cards. So this sketch is from MFT and it's number 180. So again, I chose some of the tone-on-tone designs for the background and then picked out some of these busier patterns for these banner pieces. The kit does include 5 sheets of solid colored cardstock, and it's a nice heavyweight cardstock which is intended for card bases, but I almost always use a 100-pound white cardstock for all of my card bases. And then I love to add layers, so I do include a lot of cardstock, and this is just from my craft room. I just look for colors that coordinate really well with the pattern papers. I'm using some of the white doilies, but I felt they were just too white, so I did use some of this gold spritz spray just to add a little more interest to them. And then in the center of those doilies, I'm going to use some of the solid cardstock, and this is just the same color as that matted layer. And then I'm stamping these really beautiful butterflies, and I'm using some Versamark ink because I plan on embossing them. This is the Love From Lizi Ivory Pearl Embossing Powder. So it's not a real dark color, but it looks really pretty on this darker cardstock. It adds just a real soft shine to it. Several months ago, one of my subscribers asked me, why don't I have a pink embossing gun? Because mine was blue. Well, I decided to search for one and was so excited I found this pink embossing gun. Now it matches my ATG tape gun and my pink scissors, so it's kind of perfect. So this is where you'll see that I don't follow this sketch exactly. Instead, I'm using this big doily instead of that other rectangular spot, and I don't add a sentiment to the front of this card at all. I decided for a lot of these cards, I'm just going to leave the front blank, and then that way I can add whatever sentiment I want to on the inside of the card. And I'm obviously having a lot of fun with these pearls because I'm going to use them again to embellish these cards. So I'm just going to add 3 in the lower corner and then 2 in the upper corner. And I used that pearl color and then the gold color on this burgundy card. And then once again, I made another 2 cards, so I have a total of 4 cards using this card sketch. So that brings me to a total of 12 cards so far using this kit. Next up is Freshly Made Sketches number 291. So I love this sketch because you can either use one larger pattern paper design in the center of the card, or you could change it up and add 2 different designs, or maybe like a solid cardstock for that thin strip, and you could put a sentiment there. But for this card, I decided to just use the one solid piece, and then I just cut them so there's that little divide between the 2 of them. And then for the background, once again, I'm using just the soft tone-on-tone designs. That way you're not competing a lot with the busier patterns. It also helps to add the layered cardstock when you do have several different busy patterns. And then to divide those pieces, I thought it would be fun to just put one single peel off right between the 2 and then go the whole length across the card. Now for this pink card, I didn't really like the blue peel off with it, so I did pull out some of the clear iridescent glitter, which are my favorite peel offs. I have several of them because I don't want to ever run out. So I went ahead and cut out some oval die cuts, and then I pulled out the beautiful stamp set. So there are 3 different sentiments, and they're nice big bold sentiments on the stamp set that's in the kit. And then there's a whole bunch of beautiful butterflies. But I will admit I am just in love with these sentiments. They're so perfect for encouraging, uplifting cards. And I give out a lot of those, so this is a stamp set I'm going to be reaching for all the time. So then just to mat those sentiment ovals, I did use a scalloped oval die, and then my little trademark, I put that little banner in the upper corner. And then just a finishing touch, I pulled out the little sequin mix and just adding two, one on each side of the sentiment. So overall, this is a pretty simple card, but I really like how it turned out. And then once again, I did make 4 cards, 2 of each of the designs, and then here I'm just putting that scrap of paper on the inside. So now I am up to 16 cards. Up next, I'm using Reverse Confetti sketch number 20. For the background of both of the cards, I'm using some of the specialty paper, and this is the satin cardstock, and it is so lovely. So the one is a really pretty pink, and the other is kind of like a rose gold, real soft pink, and they're so pretty, and I love that they don't reflect everything like the mirror cardstock, which is beautiful as well. And then for this strip across the lower part of the card, this is also some of the specialty cardstock. It's an embossed pearlescent paper, and I absolutely love the detail of this paper. Now, one thing to note, the paper is really soft feeling, almost like a fabric instead of paper. So when you cut it, it can tear fairly easily. So I find the easiest way is either to use a pair of scissors, or if you're using your trimmer, like the one I use the tonic guillotine trimmer. If I hold the blade real tight and kind of push it inward toward the trimmer and cut fast, I don't have a problem with it tearing. So I just want to let you know, if you're using that paper, be careful because you don't want to rip it because it's just too lovely. You just don't want to waste that paper. The pattern paper has this really pretty glitter effect on it. Kind of a hint of it on the butterflies and on the flowers. So this card is full of shine and sparkle, because between the background satin paper and that glitter paper, and then even that little banner just full of glitter, this card is really sparkly. So again, I'm going to add that little piece of the pattern paper to the inside of both of the cards. And then I decided to add just some extra shine, as if it didn't have enough shine, but I'm just using some glossy accents on just those little flourishes on kind of around the sentiment. And then a little more color, I pulled out the Nuvo drops, and I'm just covering up those teeny tiny little circles, and then adding a few more drops, just kind of circling that sentiment. And then I just thought that purple, the plum pudding color, was a little too bright for the other color, so I'm just using some of the clear glitter. This is the White Blizzard Nuvo. And once again, I made 4 cards, so now I'm up to 20 cards. So now it's time to make some shaker cards. So this is MFT sketch number 334. So I couldn't go through a whole Love From Lizi kit without making at least a couple of shaker cards, especially because her sequin mixes are just so beautiful. So I'm keeping the overall design fairly simple. So you can see I cut out the window frame for the shaker out of the background of the cardstock. And that's mostly because I don't have a lot of these colors, and I want to make sure I have enough to get through at least the whole kit. So I'm using the tip that Lizi showed several videos ago about folding the dimensional tape in half so that you only have to cut it once. So I still think this is a genius tip, and I will use it from now on when I make my shaker cards. So I'm just making sure I cut the pieces the right length. I don't want them too long or too short, because you don't want any of the sequins to sneak out of your shaker card. So then before adding the sequins, I just dust it off real quick with some of the anti-static powder. And then I'm just going to scoop out some of the sequins onto the card. and then I'll place that window right over top. So this set of sequins that I'm using is actually from the September Halloween kit, but I went ahead and pulled out all of the black sequins just because there was too much contrast. It kind of looks like there's black, but it's just more the reflection on the silver. So for the other card, the sequin mix that comes in this kit coordinates perfectly, but I really liked the little purple and pink sequins that were in the September kit, and since I had a little bit left over, it was perfect to just use them up and put them in the shaker cards for this kit. So I used some more of that embossed pearlescent paper just for that bottom strip on both of the cards, and then for kind of that border, I just used a scallop stitch border die. And then I decided it didn't need any more layer. I liked just the difference between the two colors. So again, I'm going to build up my little shaker window. And then again, I'll add some of the anti-static powder just so those sequins don't stick so much. And then I'll just dump a little bit just on the center of the front of the card and then place my window just over top. And then I press real firm all around the foam just to make sure it's secure. And then for this card I did add some of the foam stickers. So a little butterfly in the upper corner and then a sentiment on that lower corner of the shaker part. And again, I did make 4 cards. So now I am up to 24 cards. So now I'm on to Mojo Monday sketch number 235. So at this point, I only have 2 full sheets of the 8x8 pattern paper, and it was perfect to cut out these circles. So I was able to cut 4 circles from each of the pieces. So instead of 4 cards this time, I'm actually making a total of 8 cards. So one way I was able to stretch this kit out a little more is the addition of all the specialty cardstock. I mean, besides the fact that it is so beautiful, it's just great to add just that solid color along with the busier pattern papers. So that main background, I used some more of this satin cardstock and just cut almost a square size, and then just to add a little extra contrast against the rest of the background, I just put one of the peel-offs. So this time I used just the clear glitter iridescent peel-offs. And then there's some more of that pearlescent embossed paper, and I just cut thin strips and put one on each side rather than cut a full sheet and then wasting some of that really pretty paper, and then you won't see that middle part that's covered up anyway. And I used a stitch circle die to cut out those circles and decided not to add a matted layer to those circles because I think it was enough contrast against that satin cardstock anyway. So now I went ahead and adhered those card fronts onto a card base, and then I cut out these stitched banners, and then for the sentiment I pulled out that thank you die again, and I also used more of that satin cardstock to cut out the sentiments. And then instead of leaving that heart empty, I did keep that inside piece and then I just glued it back in. I love the detail on this sentiment die, and I just used some liquid adhesive and it just works perfectly to adhere it in place. Now to make sure the one side of the banner doesn't droop down because there's a lot more layers in the center of the card, I just put a little bit of foam dimension on the left hand side of that. So like I said, I have 8 cards using this sketch. So that puts me up to 32 cards. So after 32 cards, I should be finished, right? Well, not even close. There's still so many different parts of this kit that I haven't even touched yet. So we'll just keep going. So now I'm using a sketch from Simply Stampin' Challenge. So for the background of both of the cards, I'm using more of this specialty cardstock. And you can see I'm just using a little piece of the pattern paper, because at this point I actually don't have a whole lot of pattern paper left. But I still have a lot of this specialty paper, and I'm not wasting any of that. It's just so beautiful. So I did find that, especially using a full sheet of this embossed pearlescent paper, it does kind of stretch just a little bit. So instead of using my ATG on it, I did just use some score tape. That way I didn't risk tearing or stretching it at all. And then for this other card, I used more of that satin cardstock. And then I stamped another one of these beautiful sentiments. So this one says, "Spread more love." So it's another perfect, encouraging sentiment. And then again, since I don't want the one side of the sentiment to kind of droop, I just put some adhesive, the little foam adhesive on one side, and then just the ATG on the other. And then I'll go ahead and put those card fronts onto a card base. And for a lot of the cards this time, I did leave that white border of the cardstock. I never really plan whether I'm going to or I'm not going to. It's just kind of what my mood strikes. So we'll put just a few of those pattern papers on the inside, and then of course add my little banner. And this time I used some of this gold mirror paper. And then for those larger circles in that upper corner, I pulled out some more of the pearl bling. So I'm using the big, large gold, and then also just kind of the medium color of this soft pink. And of course using some adhesive to make sure that those stay in place. So at this point I don't have as much paper left, so I only made 3 cards using this sketch. So that puts me up to 35 cards. So on to the next set of cards. So I'll be using Operation Right Home sketch number 171. So at this point I'm looking for sketches that will work well with the size of the paper scraps that I have left over. So this is a good sketch if you just have some narrow, short paper scraps. So the strips are 1.5 inches wide and 2 3/4 inches long. So I have an assortment of different patterns left, but I kind of felt like the blues needed to be by themselves, whereas the pinks and purples all seem to mix together just fine. So for this background cardstock, this is the Vanilla Ivory. It just seemed to stand out just a little too much, so I added some of that gold shimmer spray to it. And this kind of gave it a little extra sparkle and tamed down sort of the brightness of that paper. And then of course for the blue card, I just used some soft blue cardstock. So then after I added my matted layers to all of those, I'm just going to go ahead and adhere those all together. And so this time I'm putting 3 cards together, but I do make a total of 5 using this card sketch this time. And as always, I use a lot of ATG tape. I buy it by the case, so it's actually very inexpensive, and I just really want to make sure my cards stay together. So this is another fairly simple card. So I did want to add a little extra detail, so I'm using 2 peel-offs on the bottom of each of the cards. So I used the mirror sky blue for the blue card, and then I pulled out that clear glitter iridescent for the other cards. I just love how something as simple as the peel-off stickers adds so much detail to a card. I feel like I need to own every single color, and I know I'm not alone in that. There's a lot of us that are addicted to the peel-offs. And I know we also trim off those little pieces and we keep them, because you never know when even just that little piece will be perfect for your card. So now after I get all of those in place, I'll be adding those card fronts onto my card bases. And I just tuck the edge of the peel-offs behind the card if my piece is long enough. And then I make sure to put some of the ATG directly over those ends. Not that my peel-offs have ever actually come up at all, but just in case, we just don't want them popping off the cards. And for this set of cards, I'm not leaving that white border around the outside. So what you see me, well, what you don't see me doing, I have my trimmer on the right hand side. So I just make sure to trim off any little slivers of that white cardstock because it really bothers me if any of that shows. I'm sure it's just me, but I just like to make sure it's nice and crisp and clean. So now for this circle element, I'm using the other die that comes in the kit, and this says "With Love." So I just cut out those hearts using the coordinating cardstock for each of the cards, and then I also cut the words out of some of the glitter cardstock, and I'm just putting some score tape on the back of the dies and just inlaying those words right into the die so it's nice and flat, and then I also don't have to deal with any of the liquid adhesive. They just kind of pop right into that cutout spot. And it adds just that little bit of contrast and then a little bit of extra sparkle to the card. So once I get all of those sparkly words put into place, I can peel off the back of the score tape and then just adhere it straight to the card. So I didn't end up using any of the liquid glue for this little die. I could have put some on the arrow just because that part wasn't covered, but I didn't feel like it was going anywhere, so I think the score tape will hold it in place just fine. And now I'll just add that thin pattern paper to the inside of the card. And then one final embellishment, I'm going to pull out some more of the pearls. I love that this sheet has so many on it because I definitely used a lot of them. And so I'm just going to use the tiny size this time. And then again, I'll put some liquid glue down first just to make sure those aren't going to move anywhere. So even using the same collection of pattern paper, I love the variety of different colors. So I have the nice burgundy, the pinks, and then the blues. And it just worked out so well, even using the same sketch. They still have like a little different look to them. So I made a total of 5 of these cards, and that now puts me up to 40 cards from this kit. So at this point, my scraps are pretty small, and I could call it finished, but you guys know that I won't, and I'll make just a few more cards. So now on to the next set of cards. So this time I'm using Operation Write Home sketch number 60. So this is a really great sketch if you have just little tiny pieces of pattern paper left, because all of these little squares on there are only an inch by inch. And then I did have a few more of these little wider strips, so those worked perfectly to put across that bottom part of the card. And then for the background, again, I'm just using more of the specialty cardstock. So I've already gone ahead, of course, and cut out all of these pieces. It does take a while to cut out all of these little tiny squares. And then I'm adding them to some of this dark gray cardstock. The kit came with one piece, and I did end up adding a few more pieces from my own collection. It's actually really hard for me to make a card without adding all of these extra layers. It's just my style, and I've always enjoyed the contrast that it provides. So for the one card, I did use more of that textured pearlescent paper, and I did use my ATG tape on the back of it instead of the score tape, but I was real careful to make sure that it didn't stretch or tear this time. So I'm just trying to lay out all of those squares to find a pleasing pattern. Try not to get the same patterns next to each other. And then I'll just go ahead and adhere all of those in place. When you're down to just scraps, You don't always have the perfect combination to make like a nice pattern when you use a grid design like this. But I think it still worked out really well, and it really showcases the variety of pattern papers that are included in this collection. So for this set of cards, I didn't add really any dimension to it. I tried to keep them on the flatter side. So I'm just adhering those card fronts onto a card base, and this time I am leaving that white border. For the sentiment on these cards, I'm using the thank you die again. So I just cut it out of the coordinating cardstock. And then I just use some liquid adhesive to adhere that into place. And then for the inside of the heart, I used that same cardstock. So the gray, I used that gray, and then I wanted to pop up the heart just a little bit. So I cut out the little heart again in the gold background paper. And then I did the same for the other card, and then for that little tiny heart, I used just a little bit of, it's like a rose gold or a light blush color, just to make that little heart pop out just a little bit more. And then just a finishing touch on the cards, I pulled out the little bag of sequin mix, and I used the largest size from each. So the one is like a real light blue, and then the other, it matches almost perfectly to this specialty paper. So just use a little bit of liquid adhesive and just adhere those onto the cards. And so I made a total of 2 cards, so now I'm up to 42 cards. For the final sketch, I'm using MFT number 411. So again, I'm using this same specialty paper for the background. I had just enough to do one more card with it. And then this is the largest piece of the pattern paper I have left. So I decided to use it for this card, and then I used some of the specialty paper just to add a little extra shine. And I just put some dimension on the ends just to keep it all level. And we'll put that all onto a card base. And then I realized I'd only used the butterflies one time. And these butterflies are really pretty. Plus I hadn't used the stencil yet. So you can see I did ink it up because I was practicing just a little bit with it. So I just used a foam distress tool to put that ink onto some of the white cardstock, and then use some embossing ink, and then use the coordinating butterfly stamp stamped just right over top of the stenciled wings. And then I'll go ahead and emboss that, and it just adds this really light shimmery look. So I'm excited I got to pull out my pink embossing gun again. So after that cooled, I just pulled out some scissors, and I'm going to do just a simple fussy cut and leaving a thin white border all around the butterfly. So even such a detailed stamp, it's still a really easy image to simply cut out yourself. So now I'm just going to figure out placement for that. And I was going to put it flat, but then I wanted the wings to just sort of pop up just a little bit. So I just used a couple small pieces of foam dimension on the upper part of the wings. And then a last finishing touch, I'm just going to add a few of the pearls to the bottom of the card. So I didn't have enough of the same size, so I put 2 of the middle size on the outside and then just one of the tiny ones on the inside. So I just made one card using this sketch, and that puts me up to 43 cards. So at this point I'm pretty much out of the pattern paper, but I realized I hadn't even touched this bunting pack, and it has all of these fun little triangle pieces, some of them with the scalloped and some with a straight edge. So I thought I would do a card just using those as the pattern paper. So I kind of laid them out and played around to see what kind of design I could come up. And so I kind of made this sort of grid design just using all of these fun triangles. And then the background is just some of the gold matte mirror paper. So I think it worked really well with the soft colors on all of the patterns in the little bunting pieces. So now that I have all of those bunting pieces adhered down to the gold cardstock, I stamped one of the sentiments, and this is a favorite sentiment from the kit, the "Have a Beautiful Day." So I used a scalloped circle die, and then I just cut off the very edge of the circle just so it would sit at the edge of the card. And then I used a piece of the lace, and I'm just adhering that in place. And you can see I cut out that scallop circle from the background cardstock there. Now I'll put lots of adhesive on and adhere it to a card base. And then I am using some of the foam dimension just so I can put it over that lace in the middle without it being like lopsided. So I just put a piece around the lace and then just some small pieces on the rest of the sentiment. And then just a finishing touch, I pulled out some more of the sequin mix, and I'm just putting a few around the sentiment. So that is my final card, and that brings me to a total of 44 cards using this lovely December 2018 card kit. So now I'll just do a quick recap of all 44 cards I made using Love From Lizi's December 2018 card kit. This kit has so much paper in there, you'll be able to make a lot of cards. I just loved the soft colors and all the lovely florals and butterflies in this kit. And now I'll show you everything that is left over. So I had one piece of cardstock, a few of the specialty pieces, a little bit of pattern paper, the puffy stickers. I never touched those thick flowers, one doily, more of the bunting. I never used the buttons either. A little sequin mix, some of the pearls, the ribbon, of course the peel-offs, and then the stencil and the stamp set and the Nuvo drop, and then the dies. So not a whole lot left over. And then there's some of the scraps of the specialty cardstock, and then I still have a ton left because I got all of it. If you are interested in purchasing the kit, I have provided a link in the description box. The Love From Lizi monthly kits do sell out quickly, so don't delay if you really want one. If you enjoyed my video, please subscribe, and don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.